Hello and welcome to Lady Dynamite Creates. Today I'm going to be showing you my process for Miss Pumpkin Spice Lottie. Since the doll is going to be completely covered, I thought this Draculaura that had some discoloration on her body would be perfect. Since I want this doll to be wearing some Uggs, I need to do some alterations to her feet. First thing I do is I heat her leg with the heat gun, and then I gently push it into the position that I want it to be in. I use silicone finger covers to help protect my hands from the heat because it does get very hot. Do this at your own risk because not all of the Monster High plastics are the same. When I tested this on my mannequin doll, it worked a lot better. Draculaura's plastic wanted to melt more. Here you can see the difference. I wanted this doll to have a balayage look to her hair, so I needed her roots to be much darker. To achieve this look, I prepared my yarn and then I dip dyed it in some Rit Dye More. I did need to reroute just a little differently than I normally do. What I did was slide the needle tip onto the very edge of the hank of hair. Then I would cut off the excess at the tip and then plug it into the head. It is so very important that if you want to dye yarn, because it is an acrylic, it's a synthetic fabric, to properly dye it. Don't use Sharpies. Here is some Sharpie that I applied to some yarn, and you can see here, it still transfers onto the paper. This would be your doll's face. Please don't do this. Then you can see I have my properly dyed yarn that I used some Rit Dye More. Make sure to rinse it good and do the proper instructions. And what? No transfer! Sharpies bad? Dye good. For my face up, you see my usual suspects lined up here, pencils and pastels. And like always, to get started on my face ups, I sketch in the placement of the eyes. This face up gave me some trouble. I just kept being very unhappy with it, and I think I wiped it 3 times. In the end, I figured out that I just didn't like the pink undertones on her. It's been a very long time since I've worked on a Draculaura. I finally just decided to shift her color a little bit with some orange tint. If any of you have any recommendations on a particular color to use for blushing the Draculaura, I'd greatly appreciate it. Just leave a comment down below. After I got a base color down, I went ahead and started highlighting the forehead with a little bit lighter color and then doing some contouring to the cheekbones and around the face. Then I go in with my little stubby brush and detail out around the eye socket, the nose, and around the mouth. I do a bunch of passes of it throughout the course of the doll, and I like to use a Q-tip to blend out my colors. Do you guys have like a favorite doll you like to customize? I have to say I think my favorite one is probably Frankie. I really like her sculpting. She's such a pretty doll and I like the green. I really don't like working on Lagunas though. She's probably one of my least favorite. She blushes nicely, but I have a hard time getting past the fishy look of the eyes. I always struggle with that. I did do a set of inset eyes for a Laguna once and they turned out really nice. I may try that again one day. Here you can see I've taken a pastel pencil and I have highlighted a few areas on her face and then I blend those out. I'm able to highlight smaller areas when I use the pencil, so I like doing that. Then I go ahead and I blush the apples of her cheeks. Then I take a little bit of turquoise pastel and add some colors to the inner eye, right underneath there and along the temples. Typically this area on people have a little bit of discoloration because of the veining. I feel like it just adds a little bit of dimension. And I add a first pass of color to the lips. Then I move on to detailing out the ears. Now I'm darkening the eyeliner again and taking a first pass at the scaleras. They'll get a few coats throughout the face up. Now using the dot method, I start adding in her eyebrows, trying to keep the dots symmetrical. Then I connect my dots and do a little cleanup with eraser. Also do a little measuring to make sure that they're even. Then I add a little bit of highlight underneath the eyebrow. Now I sketch out the iris shape, add the waterline, and start blocking in some color. Now I define her eyelid crease and I blend it out a little bit and start adding in the individual hairs to her eyebrows. Do you have a part of the face up that you just really dread doing? I don't like doing eyelashes. I feel like I mess them up too often. And now I decide to push the highlighting in some areas a little further as well as deepening some of the details. Now I take another pass at the lips. I keep them deeper on the top lip and in the corners, a little bit lighter on the bottom lip, make it poutier. Then I go ahead and add the pupil to the eyes. I make them bigger a little bit at a time, alternating between the two eyes. This helps me keep them symmetrical. Once I'm satisfied with the pupil placement, I start adding in some striations of color with a darker green and a white. And finally onto those dreaded lashes. I think I erased the lashes 3 or 4 times, but in the end I finally got the look I was wanting. The last thing to do before her final seal on her face up is to add her highlights to her waterline and the catch lights. really had a lot of fun making all the accessories and outfit on this doll. For her pants, I decided I have this old pair of jeans that my daughter has outgrown, and I thought they would make adorable little jeggings for her. I sketch out the pattern pieces with a heat activated pen, and then I get all of the pieces cut out. I pin right sides together and then sew down the front seam. Once that's done, I sew on the waistband, making sure to use a stretch stitch. If you don't, jeans won't stretch anymore. Then I fold the waistband down and sew that over. Then I sew up the back seam, and then I sew up the crotch. Then you just flip them right sides out, and you're all done with the jeans. For her sweatshirt, I get all of the pieces traced and cut out. Then I attach the cuffs to the sleeves and the collar to the neck of the shirt. Then I attach the sleeve to the armhole of the shirt. Then I sew up the side seams and the sleeves with the right sides facing. Now I sew on the sweatshirt bottom band and a piece of decorative lace. Finally, I attach a Velcro closure and then I sew up the back. For the vest, I once again trace and cut out all of the pattern pieces, and then I sew up the darts on the panels. Then I sew the side seams and the shoulder. For her shoes, I wrapped her foot up in saran wrap and masking tape until I got the desired shape I wanted. Then I sketched out the pattern pieces where I would intend for seams to be and cut those off her foot. Then I later transfer these pieces onto a piece of paper, and then I add in a seam allowance to make my pattern. I then cut all of these pieces out of felt. And these are different than normal sewing patterns because the type of boots I'm mimicking actually show their seams, so they will be sewn a little bit differently. I will always be facing wrong sides together rather than right sides together when I sew. Here I pin and sew the toe to the front of the boot. And then the back of the boot to that piece. Now that those seams are all sewn together, it's actually kind of looking like a boot. Now I line up the sole to the bottom opening of the boot and I pin that all together. And as you can see, it just looks like it's waiting to stab you. Then just sew this up, being very careful not to close the opening of your boot. Then I just give those seams a trim to get them nice and even. Now out of 2mm craft foam, I cut out the bottom of the shoe, and then I hot glue that onto the fabric. For the detailing, I take a little bit of cream felt and I cut those into small strips and make it look like the shearing that are on the boots and just line any of these seams. Of course, pumpkin spice Lottie needs a latte. So I modeled a little coffee cup and 3D printed it, and I'm going to get it cleaned up now. I managed to arrange the supports this time to require very little sanding. Perfect fit! To do the finishing on the cup, I go ahead and I paint it white and brown. Then I've taken some water slide decal paper and added a Starbucks logo. To use this, I trim it up to the shape I need it, and then I drop it into the water, and once it wants to slide around on the paper backing, I pull it out of the water and then slide it onto the cup. I then also add the Starbucks logo. Once it's dry, I can seal it with a clear coat. And of course, Lottie got her latte while she was at Target, so she needs a Target bag. I designed a logo for Target and cut it out on my Cricut. I pull it off the mat and I weed away any of the pieces I don't need. Then I created a bag pattern and I cut that out of my white fabric. Once that's cut out, I go ahead and place the Target logo onto the bag. Then using an iron with no steam, I fuse those to the front and back pieces. Then I pull off the protective backing when I'm done. Then with right sides together, I sew down the side seams. Then I tuck in both sides and sew along the bottom edge. I actually took apart a plastic bag to figure out how they were constructed. Then I sew across the top handles. And now that her little Target bag is done, she needs to have bought something, so I have this pair of leggings that I made previously, and just like with the coffee cup, I made a little water slide decal onto a piece of plastic that looks like a clearance tag from Target and sewed that onto the little leggings. And finally, just to complete her look, she needs some oversized sunglasses. So I modeled some out and 3D printed them on my printer. However, I only had red clear resin, so these did take a bath in the dye pot. Then I give the frames a paint job. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the reveal photos and always be creating.